Alright, welcome back everyone. So today we're going to talk about a poll that was conducted related to the World of Warcraft, the classic World of Warcraft, and this poll is going to talk about what classes, what races, what toons people plan to play. So it's kind of interesting, I think. So before we get too far into this, this was a census conducted by r/classicwow. So r/classicwow is a subreddit on Reddit, and they're fairly new subreddit. They basically have been around for a few weeks now, and they're already up to about 11,000 subscribers. I am not paid for this at all, by the way, but I just wanted to share it because I feel like if I'm going to take their poll, I at the very least need to give credit to where I got it from. So I encourage you to check it out. It has had a lot of good discussions so far. You can see a few on the screen here, and that's where I got the poll from. So it's, take it with a grain of salt. This is a random internet poll, but this is a poll that is conducted hopefully at the target audience of people that are interested in Classic WoW, so not completely random people. So the first thing up here is what region will we be playing. So this gives us an idea of how many people are playing in which region. And look at the top here, we see about 42% of people responding are from Europe or will be playing in Europe. We assume that these will be servers that are separated by region. We don't know for sure, but that's our guess, and that makes sense to me. So about 40% are from Europe, about half are from North America, and then a smaller portion over here on the right are Oceanic, and a very slim portion from Asia. So it seems like currently the Classic WoW interest is largely in Europe and North America, a small amount from the Oceanic region, and almost no one from Asia. So I don't know if it just the word hasn't gotten there yet to really be like a hype. The hype machine hasn't gotten started yet or not. But this poll, for the most part, if you're from Europe or North America, is probably relevant. If you're from Asia, maybe not. Oceanic region, it could still be fairly substantial, because I assume the total population of WoW players from Oceanic regions is relatively small anyway, so this might actually be pretty representative. And this was about 10,000, almost 11,000 responses, so up here you can see that's pretty good, pretty thorough response, I would say. So now that we know that about half people are from North America, about 40% from Europe, and the rest from Oceanic and Asia, this is what's really impressive to me. If you look at the split here, we're talking like that's like a flawless split. We've got like 50.5% for Horde, 49.5% for Alliance. If that holds true, that's amazing. And that would be wonderful. And to me, the best thing you can have on a server is a perfect split between the factions. You don't really want imbalance, because you get like 60-40 or even 70-30 especially, it starts to really mess with some of the mechanics, especially on PvP servers. So personally, I'm very happy with this 49.5%. I mean, that's wonderful, and I hope that holds true. I really, really do, because that would be literally perfect for me. So when we talk about the race, will be the first character's choice. So keep in mind, we're talking about a 50-50 split between Alliance and Horde. So we should see roughly in these numbers about 50% Alliance and 50% Horde. Now, if you look at it, the numbers aren't there for the Troll and for the Gnome, but just look at this like center line right here. That's the top half are Horde, the bottom half are Alliance, so that's pretty much perfect 50-50 split. So that's a good sign. It means at least people are being consistent in what will be their first toon and what faction they'll be on, right? So that gives a little more validity to everything. They're not contradicting themselves so far. What doesn't surprise me here is that, once again, this seems pretty standard to me, is we're talking about up here at the top, Undead are about 22%, Alliance are about 22%, or not Alliance, sorry, Human Scum are about 22%. So we're pretty much have what we usually would get. We're about, one out of every five, maybe 20% of an entire faction is going to be, not 20%, sorry, 40% of an entire faction, excuse me, because these numbers are going to be divided or multiplied by 2 to get the faction representation. So this 20%, even though it's total races, is really like 44% of all of the Horde. So we're talking about, about 4 to 10, or about 2 out of 5, so about 40% of the entire Horde faction is going to be undead. Similar numbers for the Alliance with humans. So 40% undead, 40% humans. That actually makes sense. That's pretty much, what I would expect for 20, the 22%, like I said, double it, make 44, 22%, double it to be 44. And then we also have pretty much, I would say, what I would consider standard representation. About 24% of the Horde will be Orcs. About 24%, 23% of the Alliance will be Night Elves. I would say this is very normal. Like, I'm honestly, it kind of blows my mind. It almost feels like this is a fake poll in how this is what I think of as being the representation of races in Alliance. Gnomes are, of course, the smallest sliver. for the Alliance, and Trolls the small sliver for the Horde, which anyone that's played in Classic WoW, Vanilla WoW, probably remembers this being true. And I don't know about Legion numbers, but I bet this still holds roughly true. Of course, there's other races now, so it's a little shifted, but I'd say it's pretty close to true. So whatever race, whatever you want to be, if you are undead, know that you'll have a lot of other undead with you. If you're human, know you'll have a lot of humans with you. And to be fair, on the Horde side, I'm almost surprised there isn't more undead than this, because the Will of the Forsaken racial is so incredible for PvP, and even for PvE, that it surprises me there isn't a little bit higher of a shift here for more undead. But this is the race split between the two factions. I could talk about races in WoW for days, by the way, so we're going to keep moving on. So again, we have around 10 to 11,000 responses, and this is what class will your first character be. And this is a little more split up. Now, one thing that's really important here, and what sticks out to me the most, and by the way, this bottom sliver, this is Paladin, this right sliver is Druid for people that have moderate color blindness. In fact, the one problem with these polls, if you have red-green color blindness, this probably is not very helpful. So I'll just quickly say this 13.7% is Rogue, 9.6% is Warlock, this probably less than 9% is Druid, maybe 8% is Druid, and then this 7 to 8% is Paladin. So Warriors are the largest amount here, right? So we've got this 19.3% for Warriors, which sounds like a lot, right? Like you think, oh my gosh, that's a lot of Warriors. We're going to have so many tanks on these servers. It's great. 20% of people playing will be tanks. That's not true. You end up usually getting, of the people that play as a Warrior, I would say fewer than half, maybe half, end up actually playing as a tank or have any intention of tanking. Maybe they'll do some off-tanking occasionally, but as far as main tanking, most people that play Warriors really don't follow through with this 19%. We're not going to see 19% of the server as tanks. That won't happen. I guarantee you. Even people that it just won't. It's going to be far fewer that actually care to tank. That's fine, but keep that in mind. Don't think we're just going to be full of tanks because we have 19% of people wanting to be a warrior. And also keep in mind in Classic WoW, Paladins they really aren't great tanks. They can tank some 5-mans a little bit here and there, but it's not anything reliable. 95% of Paladins you meet will not be able to tank anything. Now Druids. So this is Paladins. So Druids, you can get some bear tanks. So bear tanks are a little more reliable than Paladin tanks. But again, this Druid number over here on the right, we're not going to see a lot of those turning into tanks. Some of them will. But altogether, this chunk in the bottom right, this red bar, the blue bar, and this orange bar, those together, those wedges of the pie, are all the classes that could be tanks, right? And so we're talking about over 25% of all classes being played could be tanks, but ultimately I'm guessing 10% maybe of all of the Toons out there will be tanking, if that, maybe a little bit less than 10%, but I would say this wedge over here, this big bottom right corner is a little bit misrepresentative of what could actually be tanking. Just my thoughts on that. Otherwise, as far as healers, we have priests, we have shamans, shamans, what am I missing? Paladins down here, and druids over here. So we're pretty good representation of healers. Maybe about 40% are healing classes or potential healing classes. That looks good to me. So I think overall we have it says 20% warriors, 40-ish% healers, and the remainder is DPS. Those warriors, probably at least half of those are DPS. So altogether, all I'm really trying to say is there's a pretty good split here, but don't be misrepresented to think that we're going to have tons of tanks on the server just because of all the warriors. But I'm pretty happy altogether with the split here. It's nothing looks wildly underrepresented. Paladins are a little low, but that makes sense because only Alliance can play Paladins. Shaman, at 8% feels a little low, but again, only Horde can play Shaman, so it's actually pretty good. If 16% of the Horde are Shaman, well, we're in pretty good shape. So pretty happy with that split. Now, this is getting back to what I was talking about with the roles for each character. I was saying, 19% of warriors, right? Well, as it turns out, that 19%, only about 15% of all people responding plan to be a tank. So already, about 25% of the warrior respondents, assuming only warriors responded to being a tank, 25% already said they don't plan to be a tank. So that already cuts down from that 19% we saw earlier. It's also possible some paladins or druids said they wanted to tank. That's reasonable, especially for druids, but altogether, we're looking at really about 15% people are planning to tank, and about 23% healing, and about 62% DPS. So the reason why this is really important is just because there aren't actually we're wildly oversaturated by DPS. And to be fair, if you think of a 5-man composition in vanilla WoW, you want 1 tank, 1 healer, and then 3 DPS. That's generally standard for a 5-man group. For raids, it's sort of proportionate, where you want maybe 2 main tanks up to 4 to 8 main tanks, depending on if you're in Naxxramas or Molten Core or whatever. It can vary wildly, but this is pretty standard and decent representation of class roles, in my opinion. So we mostly, I still think this 15% of tanking, if you want to tank, if you have some concern there's too many tanks or something, don't worry about that. From 1 to 60, or 1 to 59, there are never too many tanks. There's always a shortage. I've never, ever, ever heard of or played on any vanilla WoW server that has ever had a shortage of tanks. There's always a need for more tanks. So don't let this 14.8% scare you away from tanking. Now, there is a concern at end game rating. The problem with the end game rating is you generally want to have one very well, highly geared tank, and then once he's geared, move on to the next tank, and sort of you want to beef up 1 tank at a time, not split up all your tanking gear between 10 potential tanks, right? So because of that, at end game rating, it can be hard to break in as a tank. So this 15% is low for pre-60 content, but a little high for level 60. So you have to be a very good tank at level 60 if you want to be a main tank for a raid group, and you have to be willing to kind of kick around and wait until you can get some of the gear if you're joining an already established guild that has a tank or two that they're working on gearing up, because those tanks will automatically take priority over a new tank. So it does take a little while to gear up. Priests, or healers rather, 23% looks great. I'm happy with that. And DPS, I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing a few lower on the DPS and a little more on the tanking and healing, but it's not bad. This is, I think, a very standard split. So one of our last polls here is, what content are you most excited about? And it's kind of interesting. So the lowest sliver here on the right is role playing, and I've never participated in role playing on any WoW server. It's not my thing, but I would say 5% of people or less being interested in that, or fewer being interested in role playing. That sounds pretty standard to me. So this little sliver on the right over here is kind of what I expect. Otherwise, this looks kind of what I would think is standard. World PvP, 25% almost, raids 27%, questing 22%, dungeons 17%, and then battlegrounds maybe, I don't know, 7%. I'm not sure. What's interesting here is, and I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed, depending on the patch we use, this World PvP number is 25%. World PvP was amazing in Vanilla WoW, especially when they released the first Honor Kill patch, when they released the actual PvP system. When that system came out, I think it was patch 1.4, 1.5. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly the patch number. When that came out, it encouraged people. There was actually a system in place where you got a benefit for PvPing. Now, what was interesting is that came out before Battlegrounds came out. So there was a patch that existed where the PvP system and the rewards were in place, but the Battleground system wasn't in place. So the only place to PvP was in the open world. That was the patch where Crossroads raids and Terran Mill versus South Shore were just kept going. They always kept going. Before that patch, they still occurred, but they weren't as frequent because there wasn't as much actual in-game incentive besides just having fun. But once, one of the concerns was that dishonorable kills came out. And once, with dishonorable kills out DKs, and then instance PvP became available where you couldn't get a DK, people stopped doing open world raids as often and instead spent most of their time in Battlegrounds. It was just more efficient for farming honor kills and more efficient for ranking up. And you didn't have the risk of losing honor by killing a civilian. So this 25%, I think a lot of people are going to be really disappointed in this. And I hope I'm wrong. But I think 25% of people that want to do world PvP are going to find out that actually that number goes down a lot when they realize they're getting dishonorable kills, or they risk getting dishonorable kills by participating in world PvP, and that'll crush their ability to rank up in the PvP system. So I hope I'm wrong, and it depends on the patch. If WoW launches with a patch pre-dishonorable kills, or they modify the game in some way that those don't matter as much, or any number of things, then World PvP will exist much more than I'm expecting. But I'm worried it's not going to be quite as much World PvP as 25% of players want. Like, a quarter of all people, 2,500 people responded saying they want World PvP more than anything. I don't know, I'm just a little bit worried about it, that it's not going to work out as well for them. I hope it does. Otherwise, this looks like pretty standard stuff. Dungeons, raids, questing. I would like to see something in here just like leveling up, like the leveling experience as a response. That's what I would have voted for. That's my favorite thing about Vanilla WoW, was just, I don't know, not grinding, but leveling. Reading the stories, finding new quests, running into people as I'm leveling, which I guess that would put me in the questing chunk of this poll. Anyway, that's pretty much the end of the poll results. It's all the questions I had. There's a much larger poll that went around related to content, which I will cover later on, which was all over the internet. It wasn't just classic r/classic WoW. But like I said, this poll was originally from r/classic WoW. Please check them out. They've got a lot of good discussion going on there. I've had a lot of fun participating and sharing my ideas with like-minded classic WoW enthusiasts. But as far as this goes, I think my ultimate little summary here, my too long didn't watch, is just that this is a very standard representation, I think, of what I would expect from people that want to play classic WoW. The classes, the races, the factions are pretty well split. I don't really see any major flaws where everyone's going to roll shaman or anything crazy. It's pretty nicely split. I think we'll have a pretty good, for leveling, I think tanking and healing and DPS are going to be pretty well represented, maybe a little low on the tanking. I think endgame rating is going to have a pretty good split overall, maybe a little short on tanks, but probably pretty good for endgame rating. And as far as what people want to do, it looks like we've got a lot of people interested in a lot of different things. Role-playing will be a little bit low, but if they make a single role-playing realm or just a couple role-playing realms and they have the right amount of realms relative to the amount of people interested, I think role-playing will find a perfect home somewhere out there. So I'm not too worried about those people. I think they'll be okay. But yeah, so I'm excited. I think I'm really happy to see some feedback from the community and get a sense that the community knows what they want, and they have, I don't know, how does that happen? That half are Alliance, half are Horde? It blows my mind that Blizzard designed the game so well that the classes and the races and the factions have pretty good splits between them. So I'm very excited about that. Anyway, that is all for today. Let me know what you think. I think it's great to hear the community's response. I think this helps Blizzard also to some extent. So I think we should get more of these polls out there and get a lot of people responding to it and try to get Blizzard's eyes on more and more of these polls to get a good representation of what all of us want. That's all for today, so thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.